This young man was bullied by his classmates while studying at law school. After graduating and starting work, he was also ostracized and disliked by his colleagues. Yet he possessed talent and became the head of the forensic department. Recently, a series of serial murders have occurred. A decomposed body was found in a hotel bathtub. A person was burned beyond recognition in an apartment building. These are all difficult cases that are causing the investigation team a lot of headaches. The entire investigation team has only one key figure who can help shed light on these clues. The character in question is Fang Yizhen. However, no one knows that he suffers from autism and has a close relationship with a girl who often appears at the crime scenes. The investigation begins with the death of a female singer surnamed Su. This death also initiates the series of murders that follow. The singer, surnamed Su, is considered a faded star, having reached retirement age, but her death had a huge impact. It caused a public uproar for a long time. On the night of the murder, countless journalists and reporters surrounded the scene. Her body was quickly removed in a barrel. Besides finding chemical containers holding a decomposition solution, the homicide team found no other clues related to the killer. After returning, they congratulated the investigator on his promotion to team leader because he had just caught the murderer in the swimming pool. For someone as cautious as Yizhen, he could not tolerate any mistakes in the evidence-gathering process. After a night of diligently comparing fingerprints from the crime scene evidence with the killer's fingerprints, Yizhen discovered that the authenticity between the two samples was 0.3%, exceeding the allowed authenticity level of 0.1%. Furthermore, he also discovered evidence of forgery. He immediately took the results to the team leader, requesting a review of the case. The entire team, from the leader to the deputy, scolded and mocked him, calling him crazy. Everyone wanted to solve the case and earn a promotion, so they convicted him indiscriminately despite the ambiguous evidence. Unable to do anything else, Yizhen decided to review every small clue alone. He started with the victim's belongings in the Su Kaiyan case to avoid mistakes. The suitcase, shoes, handbag, ID card, and even a bathtub stopper were meticulously examined. Besides her fingerprints, the bathtub stopper also had the fingerprints of a teenage girl. His face darkened. He didn't record this information and decided to hide the evidence because that child was his long-lost daughter. Previously, Yizhen had neglected his family because he was so engrossed in his work. His wife, disheartened, had divorced him and left with their daughter for a long time. After the shock, Yizhen became withdrawn and isolated. Whenever he recalled the painful past involving his wife and daughter, his head felt like it was going to explode. An ambitious female reporter named Hai Yin had colluded with a corrupt investigator. She repeatedly helped him pay off his gambling debts in exchange for confidential information on cases to use in her articles. This time, she obtained details about the decomposed body of a female singer found in a bathtub. The investigator suspected her of recklessness. That night, Hai Yin was determined to go to the scene, hoping to take more photos for her article, but the security guards refused. At that moment, Yizhen bravely stormed the scene to gather more clues. She waited outside. While Yizhen was examining the bathtub, he discovered a needle lying beneath the drain. While waiting for the sample analysis results, he secretly checked the juvenile crime records and found information about his daughter. She had been arrested for assaulting a defenseless drunk person. Due to her mother's death, Xiaomeng was sent to a reformatory. However, she escaped on the very first night and has remained missing ever since. At the same time, the investigation team discovered that the crime scene camera footage showed a girl appearing and leaving before the victim's death. Knowing this, Yizhen became even more certain that the case was connected to his daughter. Therefore, he had to keep any clues that could be detrimental to her hidden. Further investigation into his daughter's assault case revealed that the reporter who wrote the article was named Hai Yin. He contacted Hai Yin directly to inquire about the bar where the incident occurred. She took him to the bar, but he mercilessly chased her away. He went alone into the VIP room and questioned all the staff about Xiaomeng, but everyone shook their heads, saying they didn't know the girl in the photo. They'd never even heard of her name. However, Xiaomeng was indeed a former employee there. For some reason, they had lied. When the manager discovered this, he immediately beat and kicked Yizhen out of the bar. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, an employee, Xiaomeng, had helped found Yizhen and told him the truth. Xiaomeng had previously dated a boyfriend named Ahao, who was also an employee at the bar. But after getting into a fight with a customer, Xiaomeng was also fired. Since then, no one had been able to contact her. Meanwhile, Hai Yin hired a locksmith to break into Yizhen's car and found the case file of the female singer. Through the photos of the victim's body and her interactions with the victim's mother during the investigation, Hai Yin discovered that the crime scene was arranged exactly like the cover of the photo album at the victim's house. The victim's mother also confirmed that while alive, the victim had plans to release a new album, so she had undergone plastic surgery. Therefore, it was impossible for her to have committed such a foolish act herself. Immediately afterward, news of the singer's mysterious death spread widely. This highlighted the weakness of the serious crime investigation team. The team leader angrily reprimanded his subordinates, not only for being inferior to reporters, but also for daring to leak information. At this moment, Yi-Jen brought the body in for another examination. The victim's skull showed no signs of jaw reshaping or rhinoplasty. Analysis indicated it was the body of a man. The singer was indeed still alive. The investigation team immediately dispatched people to search for her whereabouts everywhere. At her home, they found her phone, but there was no password to use it. Fortunately, the IT team located where she had used her ATM card 2 hours earlier at a department store. The investigation team immediately retrieved all the surveillance footage from near the store for review. Sure enough, the singer was still alive. She was carrying a rather large bag. They followed her down a small alley but lost track of her because there were no surveillance cameras along the way. The investigation team questioned a woman living nearby. She directed them to an apartment building, but before they could reach the building, they received a report that it had caught fire. Fire trucks were quickly dispatched to the scene to extinguish the flames. When the investigation team and forensic team arrived, they discovered the fire originated from a charred corpse. Based on the items collected near the victim's body, they confirmed that the burned person was a highly skilled employee who had worked at the apartment building named AG. However, during the autopsy, a cosmetic nose implant was found in Yi-Jen's nose. Combined with the skeletal structure, he suspected the body was that of a young woman. It seems this is the most difficult serial murder case to investigate to date. The killer acted with extreme care. Neither crime scene left any fingerprints or clues. At this point, the team leader agreed to let Yi-Jen directly participate in the investigation. However, he secretly hoped Yi-Jen would make a mistake, using that opportunity to remove her from the team. Once again, Hai-Yin approached the investigator to buy information. Through the investigator, she learned that they suspected the killer was the girl in the photo cropped from the crime scene camera. The tattoo on the girl's arm immediately identified her as Xiao Meng, the person Yi-Jen was searching for. In an interview years ago, the girl had admitted that her father was a forensic pathologist. Hai-Yin discovered the father-daughter relationship between them. Yi-Jen was threatened by Hai-Yin into becoming her informant, otherwise his and his daughter's secrets would be revealed. Meanwhile, Yi-Jen obtained new clues about the charred corpse. There was no dust in the victim's lungs, leading him to suspect the body was cremated after death. Furthermore, the dental arch matched that of the female singer. Therefore, he was certain the body was hers. In the case of the decomposed body found in the bathtub, the investigation team had previously found a large quantity of anesthetic in the victim's stomach. Those capsules were only slightly corroded by stomach acid. The killer must have calculated the timing for the victim's death before the body was completely destroyed. If so, where is Ajie now? The police began to speculate that Ajie might be the killer, but he had no motive for the crime. No connection could be found between them. Moreover, why would the killer so conspicuously leave evidence at his workplace this time? The apartment building didn't have security cameras, so they couldn't investigate further. They shifted their focus to Ajie's home. Upon arriving, they discovered signs of a break-in at his house. After inquiring around, neighbors confirmed that he had been away for 2 days. However, the investigation team found a cancer medical record and medication for the disease at Ajie's father's house. His father, however, was completely unaware of this. Just when all leads seemed to be at a dead end, both the newspaper and the police received a package sent by Ajie. The document accused the pharmaceutical company where he worked of exploiting employees and illegally firing them. However, Hai-Yin's superiors disagreed with the exploitation allegations at this time, as the pharmaceutical company was a close client of the newspaper. But this package was extremely significant to the police. The police found the manager's footprints at Ajie's house. In addition, a memory card found in Sukian's body contained the company's timesheets and financial reports. Additionally, there was a picture of the manager's name and a threatening message to Ajie. They had sufficient authority to summon the manager for questioning. However, the police chief ordered his immediate release. It seems this company's influence extends beyond simply buying the press. They can also manipulate the police. While the investigation team felt helpless, the forensic team analyzed a crucial clue. They confirmed the identity of the decomposed body as a young man named Ahao. Hai-Yin also obtained this information through the police officer. She immediately remembered that she had interviewed Ahao at the bar. After using various deceptive tactics to approach his sister, she finally found his address. She immediately informed Yi-Jen, and they both went there. Sure enough, they found photos of the victim and Xiao Meng together. However, in the photos, Ahao was disguised to look exactly like a girl. It turns out Ahao and Xiao Meng Xiaomeng weren't lovers but friends. Because his family didn't accept his true gender identity, he ran away. Even in death, he died as a woman. Through these two cases, the investigation team gradually realized the killer's motive. The killer wanted to fulfill the victim's dying wishes. For example, the killer helped a Hao become a woman, or helped a faded female singer, ridiculed by the public, want her new album to gain wider recognition. As for Jie, he was an exceptionally talented employee. Every year, he helped the company sell many projects. But when he discovered he had cancer, the company forced him to resign. Furthermore, they withheld all the bonuses he deserved for his years of service. This filled him with intense resentment. He decided to use his death to expose the company's true nature and bring about their downfall. That night, Jay appeared near the apartment building. He frantically distributed flyers protesting his innocence, alleging that the company had exploited him, withheld his salary and bonuses, and accused the company of bribing officials. Adding to this was the killer's ingenious deception, which led to the charred corpse being mistaken for AG. A resentful employee, driven to despair by exploitation, returned to the company to commit a desperate act. This immediately attracted intense media attention. Ultimately, the case became so serious that no one dared to vouch for the pharmaceutical company anymore. At this point, Hai Yin was finally allowed to publish the article Jie had sent. However, the article maintained the view that the killer had helped the victims fulfill their dying wishes. The killer's identity remained unknown, as no one knew that Yi Zhen was secretly protecting the culprit, concealing all evidence related to his daughter. The next day, the police received a call reporting a crime from a mysterious girl. She even specified the location of the murder. The investigation and forensic teams quickly arrived at the scene. The owner of the timber workshop was immediately summoned for questioning. However, upon seeing the victim's photo, the owner confirmed he had never met the person. The autopsy revealed no other sign of foul play, besides a tumor that had metastasized to the lungs. No fingerprints or other plausible clues were found at the scene. The owner had a perfect alibi. Therefore, the police could not conclude anything at this point. Using her extensive connections, Hai Yin arranged an interview with the owner of the timber workshop. Besides his timber business, he was also a very famous and wealthy sculptor. Hai Yin was invited to his private residence. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she sneaked into his workshop to gather evidence. Aside from trophies and medals, there was nothing suspicious there. She and Yi Zhen decided to follow him to see where he frequented. They discovered that this wealthy and refined man often visited a dilapidated wooden house on a hill. He would take something from another man and leave. Yin continued driving, tracking her target. Meanwhile, Yi Zhen broke into the house and saw a dog barking loudly. Unexpectedly, the dog's owner was not only in a dilapidated state, but also blind in both eyes. At this point, the mystery began to unravel. The blind man and the owner of the woodworking shop were twin brothers. The sculptures created by the blind man had earned his younger brother a lot of money. However, in contrast to his brother's wealth and glamour, the blind man lived in the dark shadow of being exploited for his sculptures. Fortunately, this injustice was finally brought to light. Hai Yin quickly provided the editorial office with all the information and images about the lumber mill owner exploiting his blind brother for profit. When Yi Zhen asked the blind man about Xiaomeng's identity, he confirmed that he had met her before. He even said that she was very eager to see Yi Zhen again. This further fueled Yi Zhen's suspicion that his daughter was the mastermind behind everything. He returned to the scene where Ajay's body was found and found a syringe in the yard. Next to it was a trail of melted candle wax. He then went back to the scene of the murder and decomposition. Candle wax was also found in the bathtub. Moreover, the fingerprints on the syringe were Ajay's. Yi Zhen concluded that their deaths were both self-inflicted. He recalled the days before his wife and daughter left. His daughter had sneaked into his office many times to secretly look at forensic files. Once, she read about a case where a victim committed a fatal act that he was investigating. Then the little girl became extremely frightened. She asked her mother what doing something foolish meant. His wife explained that when people are overwhelmed with sadness, they run away to a better place. What we can do is light a candle for them and tell them not to be afraid, that everything will be all right. Later, the little girl did something foolish, but luckily nothing happened. Back in the present, Yi Zhen tries to convincingly explain to Hai Yin that all three cases involved victims doing something foolish. First, there was the case of the decomposed body in the bathtub. There were no traces of the killer at the scene because Ahau had worn gloves from the beginning and used the singer's ID to check in. Then Ahau arranged the scene to look exactly like a music album cover and swapped the existing stopper with an acid-resistant stopper. After he died, the decomposition solution was transferred from the glass container to a plastic container and placed in the bathtub. Finally, he injected a large amount of anesthetic, enough to submerge the body and cause suffocation before the corpse could decompose. That's why there was a needle conceal under the bathtub stopper. As for the singer's case, she had a Jay's access card. She used it to sneak into the apartment building and then attached a wire to her sleeve. After injecting the anesthetic, she waited for the drug to take effect. She poured gasoline on herself and set the wire on fire. When she died, the fire spread from the wire to her clothes, eventually engulfing her entire body in flames. A Jay's case is similar. When the company's secrets were widely publicized, he went to the lumber mill to do something reckless by injecting anesthetic into his body. If so, it's highly likely that after the blind man's wish is fulfilled, he will also do something reckless. However, before that, the captain discovered the mysterious girl appearing at a rubber mill. They went there to question her and apprehended a worker who had been in contact with her. She was a special customer. She had once come to him to have a stopper made of acid-resistant material cast. The captain recalled the bathtub stopper. He later retrieved it from Yi Zhen. Sure enough, when the article about the famous sculptor exploiting his blind brother for profit was published, the blind man suddenly disappeared the next day. The captain summoned the man's twin brother for questioning, but the woodworker bluntly stated he knew nothing. The woodworker explained that his parents had sold all their possessions to pay for the blind man's treatment. At that time, he had to shoulder all the responsibility alone. Now, selling his brother's sculptures to support him, what was wrong with that? Indeed, the woodworker had struggled to make a living when he was young. He tried to sell his paintings everywhere, but no one would buy them. Fortunately, one day, someone from the art bureau discovered the intricately carved piece of wood. In an instant, the owner of the woodworking shop recognized him as the creator of the artwork. From then on, his life began a new chapter. That same day, a woman named Xin Ning discovered a white flower and a letter placed on a bridge near her house. The letter was written by Qing Jui, the enemy who killed her father. He didn't expect her forgiveness for his past actions. He only hoped his death could alleviate the pain he had caused, so she wouldn't harbor any resentment. After reading the letter, she saw a floating corpse beneath the bridge. She immediately reported it to the police. Authorities didn't investigate but concluded it was Qing Jui's body. The motive was likely, as the letter stated, he wanted blood for blood to take his own life to atone for the death of Xin Ning's father. A few years ago, Qing Jui was a cold-blooded robber. He kidnapped Xin Ning's father for ransom, promising to release him immediately upon receiving the money. But in the end, he broke his promise. After receiving the money, Qing Jui killed Xin Ning's father to silence him. Besides Xin Ning's father, he and his accomplices committed many other audacious crimes. However, he was only 17 years old at the time, so he only received a prison sentence. Amidst the media frenzy over the news of a murderer who escaped punishment at 17 but sacrificed himself at 56 to atone for his crimes against the victim's family, Yi Zhen noticed a wound on the victim's arm that resembled one he had seen on the blind man's arm. Following the pattern, the next victim would be Qing Jui. The ruthless killer had now become a target needing protection. The police quickly investigated his records and then went to Qing Jui's house to inform his wife that her husband was still alive and in danger. Their family wasn't particularly well off, but it seemed Qing Jui had a wife who loved and cared deeply for him. According to Qing Jui's wife, she knew very well about his bloody past. But after his time in prison, he had changed a lot. Contrary to the police investigation, Yi Zhen and Hai Yin went to observe the restaurant owned by Xin Ning. Sure enough, they found Qing Jui there as well. He ordered food but didn't touch it. He met the owner and said things implying he wished her a happy and peaceful life. As soon as the owner turned away, he took all the money, put it on the table, and hurriedly left the restaurant. This action was nothing short of compensation for the damage inflicted on Xin Ning's family. Reluctantly, the two immediately chased after Qing Jui. He got on a bus and stopped at a nearby subway station. Perhaps he intended to lie under the subway lines and be run over by a train. Just thinking about that scene was enough to send shivers down their spines. However, Qing Jui didn't have time to act before the police arrived. Qing Jui's plan failed, and he was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Here, Qing Jui himself admitted that from beginning to end, there was no real killer, but rather all the victims had acted rashly. The captain thought the matter wasn't that simple. He released Qing Jui to use him as bait. The plan failed. The killer would surely seek out Qing Jui to kill him and cover their tracks. That night, the captain and some of his subordinates waited outside to observe. Inside, Qing Jui was being cared for attentively by his wife. She cooked him the noodles he hadn't been allowed to eat in prison. It seemed peace would last forever. Suddenly, he received a phone call and abruptly went into the room. The noodles he was eating were left uneaten. His wife, hearing the loud noise, immediately ran to the door, banging and crying. Inside, Qing Jui had locked himself, intending to end his life. Fortunately, the police were nearby, so the rescue operation went smoothly. At this point, the captain noticed a commonality between the other victims and Qing Jui. They had all tried something reckless that didn't work out. They had all been admitted to this hospital's emergency room and become patients in the depression ward. Therefore, the captain concluded that the killer had targeted people with depression who were contemplating suicide. He suddenly felt uneasy about his son, who also suffered from depression. After the traffic accident, the boy's legs were unable to walk normally. Due to the nature of his work, he had little time to care for his son. As a result, the relationship between the two gradually became distant. But this time, he no longer got angry when the boy refused to take his medication. Instead, he encouraged and motivated his son not to give up. After returning to the hospital, he intended to question Qingjue about the next victim. But at this moment, Qingjue suddenly had a heart attack, so the captain couldn't get any information. Meanwhile, Haiyan discovered that her mother had borrowed a considerable amount of money. She immediately returned home and learned that the house was about to be sold by the owner. Because she couldn't bear to leave, her mother had borrowed money to buy it back. She vehemently objected, saying this place was filled with terrible things. Her father's business failed, and in his despair, he took the whole family to their deaths. Fortunately, she and her mother escaped that tragedy and have lived peacefully ever since. Yet, for all these years, her mother has clung to this house to remember that terrible man. At this moment, the captain suddenly had a suspicious point in this serial murder case. Before dying, the victims were all anesthetized with a special compound that is tightly controlled by the state and not easily obtainable by ordinary citizens. Ultimately, who aided the killer, or was the killer the person in the photo? The suspicion gradually became clear. A girl whose face was unclear entered Qingjue's room carrying a syringe. A few minutes later, news of Qingjue's death in the hospital caused great concern among the police and doctors. The resuscitation team failed. The captain could only look at the body helplessly. Even in the hospital, the victim could not escape. The safest place turned out to be the most dangerous. As with previous autopsy reports, Qingjue's body contained anesthetic and bruises on his neck. However, these bruises were fabricated to mislead the police. What truly killed him was the anesthetic fluid from the hospital's IV bag. The hospital was immediately placed under internal investigation. Meanwhile, Yi Zhen was repeatedly reviewing the video clip. He suspected the tattoo on his daughter must have some meaning. Thanks to his mission and the help of his colleagues, he finally found the tattoo artist. Haiyan was also interested in the matter and was present. Sure enough, the tattoo artist confirmed that the tattoo on Xiao Meng's arm was done by her. The reason she got the tattoo was because she had a very unsightly scar on her arm. It greatly affected her ability to entertain clients at the nightclub. Therefore, she used a beautiful and meaningful image to cover up the ugliness. That night, Qingjue's body suddenly disappeared. The information caused alarm throughout the police station. What was particularly concerning was the perpetrator's extreme cunning, leaving no trace. The police requested that the matter be kept secret to avoid public panic. Only Haiyan, the sole journalist, knew about it. However, instead of writing a report to receive a reward, she and Yi Zhen followed Qingjue's wife. It was late at night, and she was out alone, her destination unknown. Unexpectedly, she went to see Ning to apologize. The unfortunate incident Qingjue caused 40 years ago must have caused her great pain. She apologized on behalf of her husband. Ning didn't seem to care much about Qingjue's wife's apology. 1,000 apologies won't bring the dead back to life. However, she advised Qingjue's wife not to grieve over a worthless person. Qingjue's reckless actions only revealed his selfishness. After tracking Qingjue's wife, Haiyan showed Yi Zhen a list of people who had contacted Qingjue. They narrowed down the contacts to several people who had contacted Qingjue frequently on the day of his death. After investigating, they discovered the phone number had been called from a nursing home. This explained Yi Zhen's long-standing suspicion. Earlier, before leaving Ning's restaurant, he had seen Qingjue put money on the table and then suddenly keep a few coins. When his plan failed and he was taken to the emergency room, Yi Zhen searched his clothes and found 2 coins. That amount was enough for another 16-kilometer bus ride. Qingjue was undoubtedly planning to use that money to travel to the next location to help someone, fulfilling his dying wish. Coincidentally, the nursing home was also 16 kilometers from the bus station. They immediately went there, only to find the area already cordoned off. A murder had occurred. The body was Qingjue's, but the name tag on his wrist read Chou Yan. Chou Yan was a former teacher. His entire family died in a trip, leaving him the sole survivor. With no one to care for him, he was placed in a nursing home. The shocking thing is that Chou Yan had passed away 3 years prior due to kidney disease. Haiyan recalled that the nursing home had been the subject of numerous complaints regarding elderly abuse, overcrowding, and poor facilities. One of these complaints was from Chou Yan himself, filed 3 years prior. However, at the time, the newspaper was receiving funding from the nursing home, so they kept the matter secret. Meanwhile, the investigation team faced considerable difficulties as the building manager repeatedly refused to cooperate. According to the autopsy, the forensic team determined the body had been thrown from a great height. site. The nursing home had 10 floors in total, but according to registration records, it was legally permitted to have only 6 floors. The remaining 4 floors had been illegally constructed. This case seems quite similar to Ajay's previous complaint. Hai Yin and Yi Zhen secretly entered the nursing home to investigate. Upon reaching the 10th floor, they saw a long-haired cleaning lady leaving a room. Yi Zhen's intuition told her this person needed to be monitored. However, the captain insisted on arresting the cleaning lady and bringing all the evidence back to the investigation agency. They followed the cleaning lady to the hospital where Qingjue and the other victims had been treated. Suddenly, the two lost track of her. Instead, a video was playing on TV featuring all the victims who had died recently. The content consisted of the most heartfelt words of the deceased, each expressing their last wishes, things they couldn't fulfill while alive. Some wanted attention, others wanted answers, forever remembering their image and voice. Some longed to escape the shadow of their twin sibling so their talent could be revealed. Others wished to live as themselves, having been rejected by their parents due to gender identity issues. His parents' question about why they gave birth to a child like this made him feel like he shouldn't exist in this world. Ultimately, the main target of the case was Xiao Meng. She expressed that everyone in the video was helping each other fulfill their last wishes. Xiao Meng felt the same way. As long as her and her mother's wishes were fulfilled, she would pass away peacefully. The entire police station split up to track down the source of the video and investigate the psychological treatment history of the patients. The hospital video showed that these people had all received treatment together. Only one girl, Ya Jun, remained missing. She was Cho Yang's girlfriend, had participated in many anti-reckless groups, and was the most mysterious person. Thanks to the investigation into Xiao Meng, the captain discovered Yi Zhen's long-hidden secret. The police immediately launched a search for Yi Zhen, but he had disappeared. At this point, he arrived at Ya Jun's house. He discovered it was full of chemicals. On the table was a file containing records of cases he had solved. He immediately hid it before the police discovered it. When the captain arrived, he only found a pot of plants with his mother's last wishes written on it. He continued searching Yi Zhen's house, but found nothing. He began to get furious. He suspected that someone had been secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes, eliminating this autistic forensic expert. But at that moment, everyone accidentally saw the corrupt police officer acting suspiciously. He didn't dare answer the phone. He turned around and disappeared. It turned out that Hai Yin had arranged to meet him to get information. After Hai Yin left, she was threatened by her colleagues again. Finally, he revealed all the confidential information about the case. It was said that Yi Zhen's wife had died from a terrible cancer. Yi Zhen immediately went to the hospital to inquire with the doctor who had treated his wife. It was known that his wife had terminal cancer. Every day after returning from the nightclub, Xiao Meng would rush to the hospital to see her mother. One day, her mother refused treatment. Her mother wished to go somewhere before she died, but Xiao Meng disagreed. She wanted her mother to continue treatment. Ultimately, this wish was never fulfilled, and her mother passed away. After unsuccessful attempts to find Yi Zhen, the police issued a nationwide manhunt. People at the hospital immediately called the police. In an instant, the entire hospital was surrounded. Yi Zhen feared that any further delay would mean he wouldn't find his daughter. Therefore, he entrusted his daughter's life to Hai Yin, hoping she wouldn't let his child commit suicide. After saying this, he rushed out to be surrounded by the police, clearing a path for Hai Yin. All those involved were arrested, except for Ya Jun and Xiao Meng. The government decided to offer a generous reward for anyone who could capture the two girls. Unexpectedly, Ya Jun suddenly went to the police station to confess and meekly allowed herself to be arrested. However, her sole purpose in doing so was to see Yi Zhen. She wanted to tell him on behalf of Xiao Meng that his child was suffering terribly. Witnessing the girl's near exhaustion, Ya Jun encouraged her to have the right to end her mother's life, to free her from suffering. The girl had previously gone to the forensic department to find him, but he was too preoccupied with his work to see her, hoping for his attention. That trip determined Xiao Meng's subsequent actions. She chose to remove the breathing tube to free her mother from both physical and mental pain. The recent cases were all fabricated by Xiao Meng to gain attention. She hoped to use them to fulfill her and her mother's last wishes. Looking at the jar containing a green seedling inscribed with his wife's last wishes, Yi Zhen believed he knew where his daughter was. Previously, a moment of anger had led him to scold her harshly, causing her to leave with Xiao Meng. But standing on the rock, listening to the waves, they calmed down and promised to overcome all difficulties together. At that moment, Xiao Meng was standing on that very rock, holding her mother's ashes. The police brought Yi Zhen to the location so they could talk. At that time, Yi Zhen was too young, and coupled with his autism, he couldn't control his behavior. He thought that getting married would alleviate his condition, but instead, it caused suffering to his wife and daughter. On the day Xiao Meng was attacked by the chemicals. He only worried about the impact on his work and didn't pay attention to his daughter's injuries. He left his wife to struggle alone to take her to the hospital. Seeing his wife and daughter suffer because of him, he decided to divorce so they could be free and happy. Unexpectedly, that choice only made things worse. Yi-Jen reached out, hoping his daughter would change her mind, but she calmly replied, "Thank you, Dad, for giving me life. Now, I'll give it back to you." She clutched her mother's urn, closed her eyes, and threw herself off the cliff. This was the only way she could escape the haunting memories of the past. The only thing a father like Yi-Jen could do at that moment was to risk his life and chase after her. The result was unexpected. Both were rescued in time. Currently, Yi-Jen is receiving treatment in the hospital, while Xiao Meng has been admitted to a psychiatric facility for treatment of depression. At the police station, the captain began interrogating the mastermind. She thought she was an angel helping people create meaningful deaths, but Qingjue no longer wanted to die. Yet she still tried to sneak into the hospital to force him to die. No matter how many reasons she had, Yi-Jen's actions were wrong. Now she has to pay the price for her actions of inciting suicide and indirectly causing murder. While imprisoned, she was visited by Hai-Yin, who had heard the stories of other victims. Now she wants to hear Yi-Jen's story. What ultimately led such a frail and delicate girl to become so ruthless? Years ago, Yi-Jen was a girl from a small town who came here to live. She married, but was abused by her husband for a long time. After a while, she placed her husband in a nursing home. Due to her advanced age and frail health, she was hired as an undocumented employee by the management. Later, thanks to her extensive experience, she also worked as a cleaner in other hospitals. Until one day, she met Cho Yang on the 10th floor of the nursing home. He was very different from the others. He often cared for the other elderly residents. Cho Yang was resentful when he saw people being neglected, suffering from hunger and thirst. Not only that, he also frequently showed concern and visited her. From then on, she developed admiration and love for that man. Until one day, she saw him taking a desperate gamble to fight for justice for the patients there. He feared that death would come unexpectedly one day before he could fulfill his wish. Ya-Jun took Cho Yang's place in fulfilling that wish. She took all the medicine from other patients, medication for heart disease, hemorrhoids, kidney disease, and even the miracle drug Viagra, and gave it to Cho Yang to take. As a result, he developed kidney disease and passed away. Next, she approached places that treated depression and suicide to call upon like-minded people. Finally, they formed a group. Qingjui's wife had just discovered she was pregnant. If he were still alive, he would have waited until the baby was born. Then, the whole family would have lived happily together until the end of their lives. If Ahao were still alive and realized he had his sister's support, perhaps he would have had the courage to wait until society accepted his gender identity. If Ajie were still alive, he could have taken care of his father for a little longer before he passed away from cancer. If only the blind man could have overcome his guilt from societal judgments and his hatred and jealousy towards his younger brother, perhaps he could have shone with his talent. At the peak of her career, singer Sue had an abortion. After losing everything, she was always ashamed of it and sponsored children in difficult circumstances. Although she no longer had the spotlight of fame, after what happened, Yi-Jen would be accused of falsifying evidence. But thanks to the captain's help, his charges were significantly reduced. He was only dismissed from the department. As for Hai-Yin, she is being sabotaged by her colleagues. Her colleagues, relying on their connections with high-ranking officials, bribed their superiors to publish articles about Ye-Jun's case. Although she missed out on a promotion, Hai-Yin realized what was most important to her. She overcame her past trauma and agreed to buy back her mother's cherished house so she could enjoy her old age in peace. The corrupt police officer received a large sum of money from his captain to pay off his debts. 2 years later, Yi-Jen was given a teaching position in medical forensic science at a university. Before his class ended, he left the classroom. At that moment, his captain approached him, asking for his help with a suspicious case. However, he only agreed and put it aside because he had an extremely important task to attend to. He stood in front of the juvenile detention center with a very nervous expression. It was raining heavily, blanketing the road. His daughter walked out of the center with an umbrella in her hand. This was the moment her mother had been waiting for. If she could see them living happily in the afterlife, she would surely be content and at peace. This film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again. Bye-bye.